Intersectional AI, a study of how information science students think about ethics and their impact. I'm Nora McDonald, and this study was conducted with Shimei at UMBC. AI mediates our everyday activities and has the potential to impose harm in everything from predictive policing to social benefits to search and social media. Discussion about AI bias and fairness become even more urgent in the context of vulnerable identities, those who are at an increased risk of discrimination and harassment because of socioeconomics, race, gender, sexual orientation, or other identity characteristics. A central problem for AI is a lack of awareness between those who design these technologies and those who use them, particularly those who experience the most harm as a consequence of them. Algorithms are the product of tech companies where diversity is often scarce and where there may be a culture of overlooking or even shunning responsibility for algorithms' harms. How then do we empower a next generation of developers to produce more ethical designs? Our study was motivated to explore the values and beliefs of students, future designers of AI. But it's not just designers' values that matter. In the development of ethical AI, context and relationships of power form an important lens to address the complex power that AI wields. This focus on identity of developers and relationships of power is perhaps best augmented by intersectionality. Intersectionality begins with the premise that people are whole human beings with a complex layering of identities. A core tenet of intersectionality is the critical importance of thinking about power in relationship to multiple interconnected social coordinates and vulnerabilities. Algorithms are perhaps most ethically significant in the context of social injustice. We set out to investigate how AI and data mining students with vulnerabilities of their own thought about AI, with the goal of exploring if experience of discrimination influenced how students thought about AI and its harms. We conducted interviews with 20 students in which we asked them about their experience with AI, how they think about their responsibility, how they think about identities that may be disproportionately harmed, how they think about ways to mitigate those harms, and how they might design a hypothetical AI. Students felt that responsibility for removing or managing bias is something that resides with companies, whom they felt have the financial power and political clout to manage design applications. Generally, students tend to focus on bias because it is an intrinsic feature of design, rather than on fairness, which is an outcome requiring them to imagine what consequences might actually occur. Yet, their empathy can be engaged to consider fairness because they feel companies don't necessarily take ownership of consequences, leaving no one on hand to monitor outcomes. Students tend to think through the lens of their own identities. This provides the vantage point that inspires expansive thinking about the implications of their designs. So while students are aware of the existence of bias in AI design, which disadvantages individuals based on, for example, race and gender, what is often top of mind are the biases that might impact them: being on visas, being non-native speakers, and immigrants. Intersectional thinking is a more complex lens than most are currently inclined to use because it requires yet more empathy work. Those more attentive to identity barriers and structural inequalities were more likely to consider the need for human interaction in mitigating bias and emphasize the importance of user feedback and the complexity of assessments. The more readily students make these connections between identity and structural inequality, the more they worry about AI fairness, which in turn makes them more interested in hearing from the people at risk than expert observers or intermediaries. Empathy work does not come easily, and pedagogical approaches must take into account the need to produce empathic AI learning balanced with contextual understanding of institutional discrimination and power. We should be concerned about environments for learning or working whose norms don't readily recognize harms. More research is needed to explore insights that might shed light on how to best prepare students to enter AI fields with a sense of empathy, understanding of discrimination and unfairness, and concern for the most vulnerable identities among us.